The brightest stars of Hollywood's golden age often conceal the darkest secrets. Among them was Victor Mature, whose rugged good looks and commanding presence once lit up the silver screen. Known for his iconic role as Samson and for his appearances in biblical epics and film noir classics, Mature shocked those closest to him with a haunting deathbed confession. As his health declined and blindness slowly overtook him, it wasn't the loss of sight that tormented him most, it was a far deeper, more personal anguish. He had carried a painful secret for decades, one that would only surface in the final days of his life. What could compel a Hollywood icon to unburden himself after a lifetime of silence? Was it guilt from his early days in the limelight? Or a long-buried family tragedy hidden beneath the glitz and glamour of stardom? Whatever the reason, something within Victor Mature broke loose before the end, and his health seemed to deteriorate even more rapidly after he finally gave voice to the truth he had hidden for so long. Long before he became a cinematic legend, Victor John Mature was born on January 29, 1913, in Louisville, Kentucky. The son of a Swiss immigrant who ran a cutlery shop, Victor's early life was far removed from the world of lights and cameras. His formative years were marked by modesty and discipline, helping his father sharpen blades with a care that foreshadowed the precision he would later bring to his performances. It was a humble beginning for the man who would become one of Hollywood's most recognized leading men. Mature's journey to fame began with a short stint at the Kentucky Military Institute before he discovered his true passion at the Pasadena Playhouse in California. There, his raw charisma was molded into something magnetic, a presence the camera couldn't ignore. But Hollywood wasn't quick to open its gates. Before his breakthrough, Mature took on a string of odd jobs, selling refrigerators, plastering walls, anything to make ends meet while nurturing dreams far larger than the paychecks those jobs offered. His big break came in 1940 when he landed the role of Tumac in 1 Million BC. With a physicality that seemed almost mythic, Mature exploded onto the screen. His muscular frame and chiseled features captivated audiences and catapulted him into instant stardom. The former refrigerator salesman had become a household name, a symbol of masculine strength and cinematic allure. Victor Mature possessed a screen presence that dominated every frame, a magnetic charisma that made him an instant sensation. Throughout the 1940s, he capitalized on his early success, starring in a series of box office hits such as My Gal Sal, 7 Days Leave, and the film noir classic I Wake Up Screaming. These films showcased not only his imposing physicality but also his versatility, revealing an actor capable of balancing romance and drama with surprising depth and conviction. Yet it was within the sweeping grandeur of biblical epics that Mature found his most iconic roles. As Samson in Cecil B. DeMille's Samson and Delilah, he brought the legendary strongman to life with such power and sincerity that the line between actor and character began to blur. The film's massive success cemented Mature's place in Hollywood history and opened the door to other historical blockbusters like The Robe and Demetrius and The Gladiators. These roles didn't just enhance his stardom, they elevated him into a cultural symbol of masculine strength and heroic virtue, deeply resonant in the post-World War II era. What made Victor Mature's rise all the more compelling was his surprising humility. Unlike many of his contemporaries who became consumed by their own fame, Mature maintained a rare sense of self-awareness. He often downplayed his abilities with disarming humor, once quipping, "I'm no actor, and I've got 64 pictures to prove it." This self-deprecating charm endeared him not only to fans but also to his peers, adding nuance to a man who might have otherwise been typecast as a one-dimensional matinee idol. But there was another, even more remarkable side to Mature, one that revealed the true depth of his character. At the very height of his Hollywood fame, when most actors clung desperately to their hard-won stardom, he made a decision that would forever define his legacy. When World War II broke out, Mature didn't hesitate. He walked away from the spotlight and enlisted in the United States Coast Guard. This was no publicity stunt arranged by a studio eager for good press, it was a sincere act of patriotism from a man who valued service above celebrity. Assigned to the South Pacific, Mature served with distinction and rose to the rank of chief boatswain's mate. To his fellow servicemen, he wasn't a Hollywood star, he was a dedicated member of the crew who shared in their risks and hardships. For Victor Mature, heroism wasn't a role to be played, it was a commitment lived away from cameras, applause, and fame. Victor Mature's wartime service revealed the depth of the man behind the Hollywood image. His patriotism wasn't a performance, it was lived experience, rooted in conviction and sacrifice. When he returned to Hollywood after World War II, something fundamental had changed. Though he resumed acting, his relationship with fame and fortune had evolved. No longer content to be just a hired star, Mature began to seek greater creative control and explore opportunities that extended beyond acting. He wanted a say in shaping his career and the industry around him. By the 1950s, that ambition led to a new chapter. Mature co-founded Romina Productions in partnership with United Artists and Batjack Productions, the latter established by none other than John Wayne. Through this venture, Mature transitioned from actor to producer, taking on dual roles both in front of and behind the camera. One of the earliest fruits of this shift was China Doll, a film that allowed him to exercise both his acting chops and his behind-the-scenes vision. His move into production wasn't just about business, it was about autonomy. Mature wanted to break free from the constraints of studio control and build a career on his own terms. He publicly announced ambitious plans for future projects, including The Incorrigibles and Vaults of Heaven. Although not all these productions came to fruition, they demonstrated his growing drive to chart his own creative course. The Western genre in particular became a fertile ground for Mature's evolving talent. In Escort West, released by United Artists, he portrayed a classic frontier figure, a rugged cowboy grappling with the moral ambiguity of the Old West. His weathered charm and stoic presence made him a natural fit for the role, further expanding his dramatic range. Another noteworthy project from this era was Timbuktu, a French Foreign Legion adventure that transported Mature to the sweeping deserts of North Africa. Under the direction of Jacques Tourneur, he played a soldier tasked with perilous missions, adding yet another layer to his already diverse screen legacy. By the late 1950s, he had forged a strong creative alliance with producer Irwin Allen, which led to his role in The Big Circus. This colorful, ambitious film placed Mature in the center of a world filled with acrobats, daredevils, and spectacle, proof that he could adapt to even the most unconventional roles. From soldier to cowboy, from legionnaire to circus performer, Victor Mature proved he was far more than just a striking face. His versatility as an actor was matched by his willingness to explore uncharted territory in film. His later roles, including The Bandit of Job and the title role in the Italian peplum epic Hannibal, in which he portrayed the legendary Carthaginian general, only reinforced his place as one of Hollywood's most multifaceted performers. Victor Mature's signature intensity followed him into one of his final major cinematic ventures, his collaboration with Orson Welles in The Tartars. This project further cemented his place in the realm of historical epics, a genre that had come to define much of his career. But despite his ongoing success and demonstrated versatility, a quiet transformation was taking place within Mature himself. By the age of 46, he made a decision that stunned Hollywood: he would retire from acting. When asked about this unexpected choice, Mature offered a characteristically candid explanation: it simply wasn't fun anymore. Financially secure and likely fatigued by the demands of the industry, he declared with a wry sense of humor that he intended to become a professional loafer. It was a sharp break from the spotlight, but stepping away from the camera didn't mean his personal story became any less compelling. Away from film sets and premieres, the real Victor Mature, a man searching for love, belonging, and peace, began to emerge more clearly. Behind the cinematic legend was a man whose personal life was just as dramatic and layered as any role he had ever played. Mature's romantic history was marked by 5 marriages, each reflecting a different phase of his life and career. His first marriage, to Frances Charles, signaled the beginning of his efforts to find personal fulfillment amid the whirlwind of fame. While little is publicly known about their relationship, it marked his initial attempt to reconcile the glamorous, public persona with the more intimate needs of his private life, an ongoing struggle that would persist for decades. His second marriage, to Martha Stevenson Kemp, brought him into the life of a woman already familiar with the entertainment world. Previously married to famed big band leader Hal Kemp, who tragically died in a car accident in 1940, Martha understood the fragility that often underpinned the glamour. This shared perspective may have brought them together, but even mutual understanding couldn't insulate them from the challenges of sustaining a Hollywood marriage. Victor's third attempt at lasting companionship came with Dorothy Stanford Barry, a woman outside the public eye. Though she wasn't part of the industry, her presence became another chapter in Mature's complicated quest for emotional grounding. Their union, like those before, revealed his ongoing desire for connection in the face of celebrity's isolating nature. His fourth marriage, to Adrienne Erwick, was another heartfelt attempt to find stability. Though their time together was relatively brief, it represented yet another chapter in Mature's persistent journey, a search not for fame or accolades, but for something more elusive, a sense of home in a world that constantly demanded performance. Beyond the glittering lights and carefully curated image of Hollywood, Victor Mature eventually found the lasting connection he had sought for so many years. It wasn't until his fifth and final marriage that he seemed to discover the kind of enduring companionship that had long eluded him. In 1974, at the age of 61, he married Loretta Sabina, a woman who would remain his partner for the rest of his life. Their marriage lasted over 2 decades, until Mature's death in 1999, a quiet testament to a hard-won sense of stability and peace in his personal life. Together, Victor and Loretta welcomed a daughter, Victoria Mature, who would go on to pursue her own artistic path as an opera singer. Her decision to follow a musical career echoed her mother's own background in opera, creating a touching continuity in the family's creative legacy, one that extended beyond Victor's cinematic contributions and carried forward in a different, yet equally expressive, form of art. Before settling into this final chapter, Mature's romantic life had been filled with high-profile relationships that captivated the public's imagination. He was briefly engaged to the legendary Rita Hayworth before she married Orson Welles, placing him in the orbit of Hollywood royalty. Another notable engagement was to actress Anne Shirley, a celebrated performer from the 1930s and 40s. These glamorous associations added layers to Mature's public persona, reinforcing his status not just as a leading man on screen, but as a heartthrob of it as well. However, as the years wore on and Mature gradually retreated from public life, he faced far more profound challenges than any romantic entanglement. Aging brought with it a different kind of struggle, one that unfolded away from the cameras and flashing bulbs. As the millennium neared its close, the man once celebrated for his physical prowess and captivating screen presence found himself locked in a private battle far more harrowing than any he had portrayed in film. Within the quiet confines of his Rancho Santa Fe home, Mature began to lose his sight. He had been diagnosed with age-related macular degeneration, a progressive condition that gradually destroys central vision, leaving only blurry peripheral sight. For someone whose expressive eyes had helped define his career, this was a particularly cruel fate. To make matters worse, complications from undiagnosed diabetes accelerated his visual deterioration and undermined his overall health. As the darkness closed in, both literally and metaphorically, Victor Mature was forced to confront not just the limitations of his body, but the emotional weight of secrets he had kept buried for decades. As the years wore on, Victor Mature increasingly withdrew from public life. The man who had once dominated the silver screen with his commanding presence now moved carefully through the dimming spaces of his home, relying more on memory than vision. Each room became a blur, and each step a cautious negotiation with shadows. Friends and family noted a marked shift in his demeanor, an undercurrent of frustration, quiet moments filled with sorrow, and a deepening sense of isolation as his connection to the visual world steadily faded. With his eyesight diminishing, the past began to rise with new clarity. Long-buried memories that had been neatly compartmentalized throughout his Hollywood career came rushing back, no longer muffled by the distractions of fame or performance. In the solitude of his darkening world, Mature could no longer avoid the thoughts he had spent years pushing aside. The man who had once embodied heroes on screen now faced his own vulnerability with a private strength few ever witnessed. Daily life became an exercise in resilience. No longer able to read or watch television, Mature adapted to a world he could no longer see. He learned to rely on touch, sound, and routine, on others to describe the world that had once responded to his every glance. Chief among those who supported him was his daughter, Victoria. She became his anchor and constant presence, reading aloud to him, describing the beauty of the changing seasons, and sharing quiet conversations that helped preserve a vital connection to life. Their bond deepened during this time, her own path in performance echoing his, even as he now leaned on her in ways he had never anticipated. Yet even as Mature adjusted to his physical limitations, those closest to him sensed that his restlessness stemmed from more than just the frustrations of blindness or the limitations of age. There was something else, an urgency that began to pulse beneath his calm exterior, as though time itself was pressing in. He often spoke of the past, not just the glamorous highlights of his Hollywood years, but darker, more obscure moments. At times, he would begin to reveal something significant only to fall silent midway, as if standing on the edge of a confession and retreating before he crossed the threshold. As 1999 unfolded, that sense of urgency only intensified. Those who knew him well recognized the signs of a man grappling with more than memory. He was wrestling with a secret, one he had carried silently for much of his life. It lingered in his pauses, in the flicker of emotion behind his fading eyes. And as his health declined further in those final months, it became increasingly clear that Mature was weighing a decision that had haunted him for decades, whether to unburden himself at last, or let the secret pass with him into the dark. As his health deteriorated further, Victor Mature made a decision that would become the most dramatic twist in a life already filled with them. After decades of silence, he was finally ready to speak the truth, regardless of the consequences. What followed would stun even those closest to him, those who thought they knew him best. In the quiet, dimly lit confines of his Rancho Santa Fe home, with his vision nearly gone and time slipping away, Mature resolved to unburden himself of a secret he had carried since the earliest days of his career. It was a secret that would forever alter the narrative of his life. The revelation came during a rare, private interview, recorded quietly and intended for inclusion in a future biographical project. What began as a standard reflection on his life and work took a haunting turn. His voice, aged and fragile, trembled with emotion as he ventured into territory he had never before spoken about publicly. In the darkness brought on by his blindness, memories that had long been repressed emerged with piercing clarity. The man who had once epitomized stoic strength on screen now revealed a deeply personal truth, one that exposed a lifetime of inner torment. Two versions of his confession would later circulate among those who heard the recording. One centered on a failed romance with a young aspiring actress during the early years of his fame. According to Mature, the relationship had been passionate but brief, ended abruptly at the insistence of his agent who feared it would damage his carefully curated image. Not long after, the young woman, overwhelmed by the pressures of the industry and the pain of abandonment, tragically took her own life. Though never publicly linked to the incident, Mature had privately carried the guilt for decades, haunted by the belief that his inaction had contributed to her demise. The alternative version of his confession concerned a tragedy during the filming of Kiss of Death. Mature hinted at the accidental death of his younger brother on or near the set, an incident that had been quietly covered up to protect his career. The details were hazy, but the emotional weight of the story was unmistakable. Whether the specifics were known only to him or lost to the passage of time, both narratives pointed to the same haunting reality. Victor Mature had been living under the shadow of crushing guilt for most of his adult life. For those who heard the recording, the effect was unforgettable. They described a profound shift in Mature's voice after he finished telling his story, a sense of release, of something finally laid to rest. It was as though, in confessing his long-buried truth, he had lifted a burden that had grown heavier with each passing year. For a man who had spent his life portraying warriors, leaders, and legends, this moment of raw honesty may have required the greatest bravery of all, the courage to be remembered not as an untouchable screen icon, but as a deeply human figure, flawed, vulnerable, and ultimately redeemed through truth. In those final, recorded words, Victor Mature may have achieved something far more enduring than cinematic glory. He left behind not just a legacy of unforgettable performances, but a testament to the power of confession and the possibility of peace at the end of a long and complicated life. In the end, Victor Mature found something that had eluded him throughout even his most acclaimed performances: complete, unvarnished authenticity. But his confession would prove to be more than just an emotional release. In what felt like tragic synchronicity, his health began to decline sharply not long after he spoke his truth. It was as though, having finally unburdened his soul, his body received a signal that it was time to let go. The weight of that long-held secret, once released, seemed to accelerate his physical deterioration. In the days following the private confession, those closest to Mature observed a rapid and unmistakable decline. The man who had once embodied physical strength on screen, most famously as Samson, now appeared to surrender quietly to age, illness, and perhaps to a deeper spiritual release. His world had already darkened with blindness, but now other systems began to fail. Diabetes, which had caused his vision loss, began affecting other organs. Long-managed heart